Welcome back, everybody, to what is possibly the most, I should say, my favorite podcast of the month. I am hanging out with Dux, who has been to a place that I did not go, but Dux, you were in Las Vegas for SharePoint. What was it? It was SharePoint Connect. Was that the name of the conference?
SharePoint Conference. Yeah, SharePoint Conference 2018.
Yeah.
But before we talk about that, man, I got to greet you.
No!
Happy GDPR Day.
It is. I was going to try to avoid it. Just kidding. Dux was like, hey, man, we got to celebrate this. And
hey, look, it's kind of like Y2K. You know, I woke up this morning. I go, is the world still around? And it looks like everything is still normal, so we're good. I opted into as much as I can, so I'm set.
I was going to say, the only thing that doesn't look normal for me for a Friday morning is my inbox because of all of the, hey, please adhere to our new privacy policy and all that good stuff. And so, Dux, what is your 30-second take on GDPR?
My 30-second take, I think, big picture, it's a good intent, and I think we'll see what's going to happen, right? I think as a result, GDPR and the EU implementing it, I think the rest of the world will follow suit. So my take is it's good, but I'm just keen to see what the ramifications are. And frankly, which company would get fined first?
Yep, I think everybody's sitting there kind of not twiddling their thumbs, if you will, but just like jumping back a little bit in my personal history, I started doing SOX compliance. Was like kind of my first big thing out of college. And so this reminds me a lot of that when we were sitting through the training sessions and people are telling us what SOX is and everyone's sitting out there going, saying, here's the legislation. We're kind of waiting to see how the actual implementation and regulation of it goes into effect. And like I'm getting these nostalgic flashbacks. I don't know if for the better that we have this massive GDPR legislation. We all sort of understand it, but until those compliance officers are in there reading through your stuff and digging through, we're not really going to know the the best practices, if you will.
Yeah, we'll see. And certainly, you know, working with my colleagues in marketing, it has a broad marketing impact because obviously marketing is in the front lines, reaching out to leads and customers and whatnot. And I'm proud to say, you know, us focused on data governance and data compliance, we're on top of it. But again, I really am interested to see what's going to happen next few weeks, few months, and see how all this goes. But again, happy GDPR Day.
Yep, it's gonna be a fun little journey here. And as Dux pointed to, and I think many of us are wondering, it's who's going to be first. It's going to be somebody. I suspect it's going to be probably a large company, knowing how the EU typically operates, and we'll see who gets the first nickel and dime situation from all this fun stuff.
Now, other than that, Vegas was awesome. So this week was SharePoint Conference 2018 in Las Vegas. A lot of great announcements. I'm sure I saw your news release, Brad, last Monday during the keynote. A lot of good things, but I think what stood out the most for me is the announcement around SharePoint Spaces, where Microsoft is taking mixed reality and bringing it into SharePoint. Now, to some people, well, this is kind of cute, but not much practical applications just yet. But boy, to me, the way I look at it is Microsoft's pushing the boundaries of what could be done. Essentially, it's making it easier and democratizing mixed reality and bringing it into a content services platform, which I don't see any other players out there doing.
Yeah, and so the pitch of this was really interesting. Microsoft tried to get me to go to this conference, and I went to Build, and then I went to VeeamON, and then this was back to back, and not to mention going to Vegas isn't my biggest thing. So they fortunately let me play with it at Build. I don't know why they weren't showing this off to like everybody at Build.
You're special.
Yeah, but it was really, it's interesting the way that they were pitching it there is that they were saying that this is the first mainstream deployment inside of Microsoft for mixed reality. And they're really optimistic that this might actually start selling the headsets in the corporate space. I'm curious how your take on that.
I mean, my take on it, I would agree. It was the first step towards mainstream deployment. Because if you look at mixed reality, I mean, things like HoloLens or even the newer devices from partners like, you know, HTC or Dell, it's still very focused around things like manufacturing or
Hmm.
car companies. I mean, last year they did this great demo around Ford on how they design cars using mixed reality, which is great. But then now they took it to the next level where they connected it with SharePoint, which pretty much everybody uses in the enterprise. The second observation that I have is, again, they made it so easy. You know, you'll see videos on how you can create a new space. Essentially, it's going to a library or a list, and it allows me as a knowledge worker, end user, to build these spaces and mash it up with SharePoint data. Now, the point around selling more headsets, I really don't know about that. I can't say much to it. But what's exciting is now they provided this mechanism for mixed reality work in SharePoint, and then partners and end users and MVPs out there can start building on top of it. So that's what I'm looking forward to as to what type of innovation now that this hook is available to everybody else.
Yeah, it'll be. This is one of those things that I think isn't going to. They're going to kick out SharePoint Server 2019 and all this good stuff here in the next couple months. I think this is going to be one of those things that kind of manifests itself over time.
Right.
What we're seeing and what was announced was version 1.0, potentially even not even 1.0. They probably had more things planned, but this is, this is where they drew the line in the sand. So this is 1.0. I can almost guarantee that they're going to keep iterating on this, probably very quickly, about other features and way to explore spaces in that type of an environment.
100%, right? It reminds me a few years ago, 3, 4 years ago, when they introduced the concept of Delve. At that time, people were like, well, that's kind of cool, using some kind of AI where it surfaces people and content. But now it's a full-blown service in itself throughout Office 365, which is the graph. But it started in SharePoint. And who knows what's going to become of SharePoint spaces. But to me, it's exciting. It's exciting innovation. And it's just, again, pushing the boundaries of what could be done.
Yeah, although, Dux, I will blame you if they come out with a thing called PowerPoint Spaces. If I ever have to sit through a mixed reality PowerPoint presentation, it's going to be your head rolling.
Dude, that would be so cool. I mean, think about what's his name? Iron Man, right? Like PowerPoint all over the place, grab a slide. And, this show will be so different. I guarantee it. Brad!
Oh my gosh. I was just thinking about I didn't really draw the connection until you just said that, but obviously they're going to try to move mixed reality probably into other products as well. And it'll be interesting to see. Power BI makes a lot of sense. I think we can all see the connection there. Excel, maybe. But then I was like, man, PowerPoint or even Word. If they come out with Word mixed reality, that'll be... I'm
going to run away from Comic Sans.
Oh, my God. Oh, until you hit the tether point. Well, I guess the next-gen devices will be untethered. Yeah. So... Yeah.
And then in the other part too, so SharePoint Spaces, to me, that's awesome. But more from a practical perspective, obviously SharePoint 2019, the next version of the on-prem SharePoint deployment. Really, especially if you're already working in SharePoint Online, Office 365, what they've done is starting in 2016, they're bringing out all the goodness, what they've done in SharePoint Online, bringing it on-prem, which is great. So especially from an end user perspective, things like communication sites, making it easier for end users to start building these sites and creating visually rich, representation of these sites. I think that's good. Doubling down on the hybrid setup around 2019 as well. I think that's very good. And then the last bit is you see a lot of improvements around SharePoint and Teams. So things like libraries, you can now see the metadata, the columns. You can format it, and it's not because today SharePoint libraries and Teams, it's very straightforward and simple. While you can see the files, you can't really manipulate any of the columns. So things like that, I think, is really good. And then lastly, a lot of the improvements around OneDrive as well.
Right.
So
that's a
all
big
in all,
one.
the conference was great, and obviously getting together with the SharePoint community was also good, and meeting up with customers. So it was a good week in Vegas, definitely.
How was the venue? I know it was held at the MGM. Was it packed, or what was it like on the ground?
Yeah, so the venue is really good. In fact, I think this was no coincidence. During the keynote, they brought the CIA of MGM up because they're a big Office 365, SharePoint, Microsoft customer. So they talked about their experience. The venue was really good. It was an intimate setting. So unlike the prior SharePoint conferences before Ignite, where we had 12, 14,000 people, This had about 2,500 people, so it's a little more intimate, but the good thing is it's very focused on SharePoint and technologies around SharePoint versus the big Ignite conference, which covers, the whole plethora of Microsoft technologies.
Yep, and I'm gonna lead this right into, well, actually into a question we got from James Allengraf. Emailed me actually on was it Tuesday, and this podcast couldn't have lined up any better. He said, "Hey Brad," and he said this might be good for your enterprise podcast. He says, "I'm currently running SharePoint Server 2010. He said, "We will likely move to 2019. We have very little assets in the cloud, but obviously with the next iteration, this might become a more prominent reality for us." He says, "We have about 300 users, 8 terabytes of content. This is going to be my first major migration. You got any advice?"
100%. So, what's his name? James?
James.
Dear James. So absolutely. A couple of things, right? So when you're moving from 2010, when you say 8 terabytes, is it just straight from SharePoint? Maybe some of this may be coming from file share, or and second is most likely it's not just going to go to SharePoint alone. It may go to OneDrive as well. So first advice is, and I think we talked at length about this, Brad, and I even have a blog post on Petri around this, is assess and discover your data. There's tools out there. Microsoft has a tool called SharePoint Migration Assessment Tool. We have a tool that's free. It's called Discovery Tool. You ran against your content, and the key is to understand what you have, and second, what you can get rid of. The name of the game is you don't move everything. Look for stuff you can get rid of, and simple things, right? Anything that's redundant, obsolete, and trivial, get rid of those stuff. And then once you decide what you want to keep, then if you're keen, again, there's tools out there. You scan the content to see if there's anything that you need to protect, private information that shouldn't be sitting where it's sitting today. So now that you know things you need to protect, you can move it to the right place. And then lastly, as you move, consider what are you moving? Is it just documents and simple sites? Or do you have complex workflows or complex info path forms? So depending on the complexity, that's where it dictates the type of method or tools you need to use. Microsoft is a free migration tool. Again, I mean, it does the job, but it only works if you're just doing a simple lift and shift, right? So make sure you check out that blog post I have, or the article I have on Petri, and certainly hit me up if you have more questions around migration.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I completely forgot about that post you wrote, and I'm going to ship that to him because that's probably the one of the better assets that we have that's directly related to this topic. So.
How's your spring summer coming along, Brad? What's lined up for you?
To be honest, man, I am counting down the minutes until I leave for vacation. Next, Thursday, I guess, a week from yesterday. I'm taking like about 10 days off, and we're heading down to the Gulf Shores, just gonna hang out on the beach and hopefully just do nothing.
So you will totally disconnect.
It scares me to say that a little bit, mostly because, well, Dux, I work at a small company, and sometimes there's some things that it's just easier if I do it because I don't want to come back to a huge fire. But I can almost guarantee that every day from 8 a.m. until at least lunchtime, I will not have a phone on me. I won't have anything around me. The goal is just to leave the phones in the condo and only check them when we're eating lunch or the kids taking a nap or whatever.
That's awesome. So around this time of the year, I mean, Gulf Shore around Destin and that whole area is just beautiful.
It's exact. We're going to Destin.
There you go.
We've been going there. We've been going there every other year for a couple of years now. We just really like it. It's good family place.
Yes.
Relatively easy to get to.
And it's not crazy, right? I think around there they filmed the Truman Show too.
Yes, they did.
Seaside, right? Is it Seaside, Florida? Yeah.
Look at you, Dux, knowing all about that area.
Dude, I love that place. My sister used to live and work there. But other than that, no. I mean, summer's catching up.
Yep.
I know it's kind of the slower time of the year, but boy, again, in this space, you never know, right?
Yeah.
Microsoft acquired just over the weekend AI technology company.
Yes.
See about that? Yeah.
Yeah, they emailed me that, I think it was on a Sunday. It was late on a Sunday. It was like 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday. And I'm like, guys, you really trying to maximize that PR cycle because there's no way I'm turning my computer on to write this. But it'll be interesting to see how that I was trying to think about how that's going to play out into their Office kind of portfolio stuff, because obviously they've got this AI stuff. They've dabbled around with it. I can't remember. They had another product that they killed, and I can't think of the name. They showed it off at a bunch of their partner conference. It was supposed to just bubble up stuff using AI, and it never.
Jam.
Yes.
I think Gig Jam, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the concept was good. It's bubbling up actually data across different sources.
Yeah.
But yeah, they killed it. But I thought it was a good idea.
No, I think it is too. And while they publicly said they're not bringing it to market, I have to believe that idea and that nebulous concept is very much a reality and still being worked on, because that is, I mean, you know what it's like. This guy who wrote in has 8 terabytes of content. Just the time and try to filter through and find all that stuff. And if a machine can do it for you, that is a huge productivity win. And not only a productivity win, but a big differentiator versus other products out on the market.
So speaking about that, what's your take, or what, at least in among your peers, what's your take around AI? I mean, obviously it's a buzz right now. Everybody's talking about AI. Yeah. Satya was just in France for a big event with President Macron. Yesterday I was watching this video again talking about AI in France and democratizing how the world works. So, do you think we're now in prime time AI, or we're still in the early stages?
So what I hear from people, colleagues, people in the industry and all that, is they don't really know, to be honest. It's a lot like blockchain. It's just one of the things that's like, oh, this is really cool, and it's promising big things. And blockchain's a whole different story, but AI is very much in its infancy, and I don't think many people kind of realize where it's impacting yet or how it's impacting. And people get lost between AI and machine learning and all that good stuff. So when you go talk to somebody, a knowledge worker on the front lines, says, how is AI impacting your daily workflow? They have absolutely no idea, and they don't even know if it is, and it very well may not be. And so I think it's one of those things at a high level, it's like really cool to talk about, but once you get down into the weeds, I don't think very many people, and myself included, truly understands how this is changing the products we're using today. I think we can understand how it might in the future, but when you go into work tomorrow, or hopefully you're not going into work on a Saturday. If you are, I apologize. We'll just say Tuesday of next week, how AI is potentially making your life a little bit easier or better.
But I'm confident, though, within the next 12 months, you'll see a lot of these AI manifest in our day-to-day work, right? So, for example, in Build, they did a demo with Teams where they had a meeting bot join the meeting. And then soon after the meeting, action items went out.
Yep.
So that's very practical, very useful. Another example I thought that was cool. I don't know how real this is. There's a whole controversy when Google did the demo with Google Duplex. Right? Making calls on your behalf and looking up your calendars and all that. I think that's very useful, but it's kind of scary. But things like that, I think you're right. We got to start seeing very practical use cases that's easy and simple and that's integrated to our day-to-day work.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And don't get me wrong, AI is incredibly complex. It's fascinating. A little scary. Like the Google thing, I think, is a perfect example of. There's also privacy issues in certain states. You can't have a bot call somebody without being registered, and then it's like if 2 bots call each other, is that a robocall? People were thinking like, hey, what if you just got a whole bunch of these Google AIs and had 10,000 robocalls going out and nobody knew they were bots? There's a lot of this kind of like ethical questions, which Satya tried to hit on at Build. And it was the timing could not have been any more perfect for Microsoft. Satya gets up on stage and talks about this whole ethical thing of AI and all that. And then Google comes up on stage and is calling a hair salon. And it just kind of shows that there are real world tangible scenarios where this is going to not become a problem. I think that's the wrong word. But it's a lot like the self-driving cars, right? It's a self-driving car kills somebody, who's responsible for it? If a bot screws up something, who's responsible? Those types of questions.
Well, just like yesterday, right? It's big news. Alexa accidentally sent a recording.
Yes.
Actually 2, I think, to somebody else. And now it proves the point. For the longest time, they wouldn't admit that they're recording, but yeah, Alexa is recording everything, right?
It is. So you probably can't hear this, but it's absolutely hysterical that you're talking about this, because I don't want to say an echo in this room. And when you send You said the name and you said send a message, and then it said to whom. And I was actually going to look and see if it was going to actually try and send an audio message, which was probably exactly what just happened to those people.
Yeah. Alexa, send a message to Paul Thura.
No, Alexa, stop. Oh, I got to turn this thing off. It's going to send it.
Anyway, no, once Paul watches this episode, he'll figure out what happened.
Oh, I literally just turned it off because it was trying to send it, and it was trying to transcribe what you said, and it said something about Paul's hair, and I hit stop before it sent. Oh man, but it is fascinating though, and it makes you wonder about where Microsoft is, because Google showed off the demo, right? But then it was like 3 days later, Microsoft has an AI assistant in China, and do you know how to pronounce its name correctly?
Xiao Ice. I use it actually. I have WeChat.
Oh, do you?
And so it's scary where you can actually talk to it as if you're talking to somebody via chat, and then after a few days, if I don't interact with it, it will just hit me up and say, hey, Dux, haven't heard from you in a while. How's it going and all that? How's the family? So it remembers everything you talked to it about.
Interesting. And what they showed off, I believe it was in London, where they showed off that assistant actually making phone calls. And Microsoft was just kind of showing like, hey, look, we can do this too. It's really not all that impressive.
Right. Yeah, because other than the IM chat, you can actually call it too on WeChat. So it's been around for a while. It's really popular in China. Interesting.
This is like one of my problems with Microsoft, just in general, is that they have these great stories. That was an exact one, and they could have very much, not that it's, Microsoft versus Google or whatever, but they could have beaten Google to the punch and just kind of stolen the thunder from their demo, which was kind of the star of their show, that Google Duplex. And Microsoft's just sitting here thinking like, we've been doing this for a while. And
well, I mean, it's true for a lot of stuff with Microsoft, right? Like, one day Apple shows something on stage for iPhone, but innovations like that, Microsoft had it for the last 2-3 years. I agree with you. I mean, Microsoft, I think, because it's so big, so it's hard for me to say.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of these little cool wins that nobody knows about that's in different pockets of the world.
Yep. Very cool. Speaking of cool wins, I'm hoping that this is wired up correctly. Dux, have you seen this guy?
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah.
I need to buy one of those someday.
Yeah, so for people who aren't familiar, this is Microsoft announced not too long ago the Surface Hub 2. And this is not your mom's Surface Hub. This is I mean, it's a fascinating device. It's a 50.5-inch display. They weren't telling us the exact resolution, but they're saying it's greater than 4K. And as you can see here, it goes in portrait mode. It also goes in landscape mode. I don't have the video wired up, but you can rotate it. And this looks like a proper Surface device. The old hub, don't get me wrong, the original hubs are amazing, but this kind of takes like that essence and really kind of rethinks it and makes it pretty dang interesting. What's your hot take?
You can have 4 of them all at the same time is mimicking real world, right? Because if you think about meetings, one board is never enough, right? As you brainstorm and you work together, you go through it like me. I have boards all over my room, or even you stick easel pads. So I think it's a step towards the right direction. And it's funny, like the other picture you have is it's standing on its own as if it was like this easel pad. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we don't know about this, namely the price and release date. Microsoft did say that it will arrive to like a private preview to certain customers in late 2018, and general availability will become sometime in 2019. The only thing they're saying about price is that it'll be in line with competitors. I believe their last 55-inch, which is the closest in size, was about $9,000. I'm expecting this thing to be quite a bit less, actually.
That's good. And even competitors, I mean, who's out there doing this, though? I don't think there's a lot, right?
So there's a couple. I mean, Google has their Jamboard, which, it is what it is. Then there's a couple like whiteboard-based products that are smart whiteboards.
Boards, right.
Yeah, that's what they were comparing it to. And until I haven't actually played with this yet. Microsoft actually hasn't even finalized the hardware for that matter. But I suspect that this is going to be a home run. I'm cautiously optimistic that it would be around 3,500 to 5 grand, somewhere. If they come in, I think in that price point, especially in the enterprise, I think they will have a home run on their hands by all accounts.
Yeah. And I think the next generation of that, the next iteration, is like making the entire wall like that, right?
Yeah. Yep. I think they did a lot of smart things. The last time, with the last gen, they had two sizes. They had was an 84-inch and a 55-inch. And I think that strung them out a little bit just from a pure manufacturing perspective. And so by going to one size that's modular, I think they're going to be able to get the price down. They also had a lot of issues with the last gen on just shipping them. Like they couldn't make them fast enough.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to solve a lot of these problems. And it'll be really interesting to see how these things get used. And I'm honestly actually hoping I can get one. Maybe this would be perfect.
You start touching it, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is just a Samsung. What is it, like a 60-inch TV? But yeah, I think I could justify a Surface Hub back here.
For sure.
What else is going on in your world, Dux, my man? You were in Vegas. Where else have you been since we talked last?
Since we talked last, boy, I was in China. Met with colleagues there and just doing our, yearly meetups. Again, every time I go back to China and visit with the teams, we have different offices around Asia. But boy, you talk about growth. Like I feel like every time I go there, there's like 10 new buildings all over.
Oh, really?
And then next week, I'm actually going to Frankfurt for the European Collaboration Summit. It's going to be, actually, it's right outside of Frankfurt by Mainz, and there's about 1,600 people that will attend, so that's exciting. Looking forward to meet with European colleagues and European customers as well.
Very cool. A man who is always traveling. Actually, we were going to try to do this last week, but I think by all accounts, it worked out better to do it this week, mostly because we had the SharePoint stuff, because you were actually in China. And all right, Dux, for the back of the book here, it's time for the Dux's Dish. What you got for us?
Dux's Dish. So while in Vegas, obviously Vegas is a great town to see people, but also enjoy good food. Had the opportunity to check out Momofuku in Vegas. And if you haven't, you got to try Momofuku. It's not only in Vegas, they have it here in DC and also New York City. Price-wise, it's not that expensive, but boy, how they put food together is just phenomenal. So for example, I had a raw tuna salad mixed with strawberries. I mean, who would have mixed strawberry and raw tuna? But it was really, really good. So check that out.
It is lunchtime here.
What about you? What's your dish?
My dish would be about relaxation. Mostly because I'm counting. Actually, my daughter has a calendar about how we're gonna relax on the beach and like all the different activities we're gonna be doing. And actually, my dish of the week is that I don't think you can ever overplan. I'm a big believer in planning and getting things out there, but more so in a visual way. And it's been real interesting having a 4-year-old around the house. I mean, she's now starting to read, but she's not going to be able to read words like vacation and all that stuff. And so what we did was we made a visual calendar of activities. And it kind of got me thinking about just different ways of organizing just my own personal life and digital life into those more visual buckets rather than just a pure calendar. And I'm trying a new setup of just organizing my OneDrive by just kind of like times of the day rather than tasks. Like I used to have one just called podcast and I just had everything. But now I have the podcast all in order based on when they occur in the week and the month. It's just a different way of organizing. I'll be curious to see if it works out.
So maybe this is for the next episode.
Sure.
I had a phenomenal conversation with, I don't know if you know, Alan Lipovsky from Constellation Research Group. We talked about this, how our lives revolve around time. But the problem is everything that comes to us is not truly revolving around time. So for example, we get emails all day long, we get IMs, but it has no correlation with time, with our calendar. Shouldn't your email prioritize everything that has to do with my meetings today first, right? And maybe hide everything else? or from a time-based perspective, right? I can, as we're talking now, I'm going to meet with, Brad, and then Brad would show up. You have a call, but look at all the conversations you had with Brad in the last 2 weeks, last month, and then kind of like a mind map approach to time. So it's very fascinating.
Yeah, this is almost coming full circle. This is what GigJam was trying to do, similar ideas, but they couldn't get the execution, at least to an enterprise grade level. And
Correct.
So, yeah.
And last thing is, speaking of time, I'm doing a webinar in the next few weeks on Microsoft To Do, Planner, and Project Online and Teams. Like when to use what for task or project management. So I'll share that online with everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's an interesting one because Microsoft has a lot of task management based applications, but to your point, when to use what and where is always can be challenging. I mean, especially if you're new to the environment.
100%. All right, buddy. So if I don't catch you before your vacation, have a good time in Destin, and then definitely looking forward to catch up with you.
Very much appreciated, Dux. As always, very much appreciate your time. I know, as you've talked about, you're a very busy man traveling about, but you've got some good insights, and always appreciate you stopping by. And everybody else, you can make sure to subscribe. There's links down below, and we'll catch you right back here next time on the Enterprise Dish.